We are really fortunate for all four of the. Thank you, sweetheart. I'm glad to have one. Thank you. For all four of the people we've had to come and speak and teach with us, and this morning, it's no less than Ari Kopmar. You can use this.
No less.
No less than.
Yeshavas. So, my better half over here is going to be holding up some things for people in the virtual world to see what we're talking about, and also you guys have your handouts, and hopefully that'll be helpful. So, the last time I gave Devar Torah, and Dennis remembered, I was over a year and a half ago at the Dot Shalom retreat. During that speech, I iterated that I try to bring a secular, relatable angle to a Devar Torah that can resonate regardless of the person's knowledge of the Torah. I do this by using the concept of gematria. And as a refresher to what is gematria, gematria is similar to playing Scrabble or words with friends. Gematria is where a value is given to a letter. For example, the number we see most commonly used in this context is the number 18, which symbolizes life, derived from the word chai. The chet has a value of an 8, the yud has a value of 10, and hence 8 plus 10 equals 18. Through the observations of using gematria, you can find meaning or correlations that make the Torah multidimensional. And more importantly, since the Torah in the Hebrew alphabet was given to us by Hashem, it displays the mysticism of Hashem and how words, events, and even events today that appear to be not relatable are actually relevant and not random occurrences at all. The first step in using gematria is looking for something that can be number related. Usually it's not very obvious. You might have to do some deep diving since it's usually something obscure and not overtly recognizable. So, I put my best Sherlock Holmes game face on to find some clues of what deals with numbers. I start with the parsha this week, Pinchas, in the 4th book of the Torah, Bamidbar. Wait, Bamidbar? Bamidbar is the book of Numbers. Well, with a book called the Torah called Numbers, you don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to realize there's going to be some numbers in this book. And to no surprise, this week Parsha proves this point almost immediately when Hashem states, take a census of all the congregations of the children of Israel from 20 years old and upward. So the first question is, why count? Especially since we just counted in the very beginning of the book of Numbers. And the second question is, how many were counted? So let's first answer the question of how many were counted. In the opening chapter of Bamidbar, we learned that 1 year after the Exodus, there were 603,550 Israelite males between the age of 20 and 60. Now, 26 chapters later, and still in the book of Numbers, we get the total figure now of 601,730. The difference between the first count and the second count is 1,820. As I indicated earlier, gematria looks at the hidden significance of a number, and I do believe that this number of 1,820 is not just a random number, nor are the two numbers of each census. And I found a couple illustrations to prove why I believe this. First, the purpose of any census is to count the number of people that are alive. And in this count, Hashem was specific what was considered a life that to be counted. And I quote, take a census of all the congregations of the children of Israel from 20 years old and upward. And we clearly see this in our number 1,820. What is considered a life? Chai, 18. And in this context, any male over 20. Hence, 18 and 20. To illustrate the whole notion of a census about life, counting lives, and that no numbers are just random, the Torah simply shows us with the two numbers of each census, 603,550 and 601,730. If you take the sum of each individual number making up the total census, you'll get 19 from the first census. 6 plus 3 plus 5 plus 5 equals 19. And 17 from the second census. 6 plus 1 plus 7 plus 3. What falls between these two numbers is 18, life. Even with death, as shown with a lower count than the previous census, the nation of Israel will still flourish with Chai, 18, life. And lastly, another example to display that these two total numbers of the census are all about life. If you eliminate the duplicate numbers that make up each full number of the census and add up the remaining numbers, 5 plus 5 plus 1 plus 7, you get, yes, 18, Chai, life. Now, to be honest, I was intrigued in finding how 18 kept showing itself. But there's a small voice in my head telling me there was something more hidden in the Torah to prove that this number of 1820 was not random. So I put my Sherlock Holmes game face back on, dug in a bit deeper, crunched some numbers in, voila. As you might know, we left Egypt and started our journey to Israel in the second book of the Torah, Exodus. Since the book of Exodus, and when the census number was 601,730,000 was revealed, we have read a total of 1,794 sentences. Add 26 to the 1,794 for the 26th chapter in Bamidbar that the census was written, and you'll get our number, 1,820. Coincidence? Maybe. But then again, it can show us that nothing in the Torah is just random. An example to illustrate how things that appear to be rather random or inconsequential in the Torah, but are really not, can actually be found right in this week's Parsha of Pinchas. In the very first sentence of the 26th chapter of Bamidbar, it starts off with, Vayihi acharei hamagefa. It was after the plague. And then as you can see in the Torah, there's literally a complete visual break right in the middle of a sentence. Normally, a break like this appears in the conclusion of a chapter or the end of a parsha, but not directly in the middle of a sentence. This is rare and called a pesika bi'emsa pasuk, a paragraph break in the middle of a verse. Being that this is not a fluke or an error, but intentional, this lends itself for me to put back on my Sherlock Holmes game face again to see if I can find a meaning of this break. I figured I would start with the most obvious place, which is the namesake of the Parsha, Pinchas. And why does the break occur here? For context, we need to go back just a few sentences of the last Parsha, Balak, to see what was happening during this time. Hashem was furious with the children of Israel at this time for worshiping Baal Peor, which was the practice of sensual indulgence where its worship was filled with perversion, immorality, and sexual promiscuity. Hashem was so angered with the children of Israel, he set upon them a plague which was called the plague of Peor. The plague had killed 24,000 people before Pinchas was able to avert Hashem's anger by taking a spear in his hand and killing Zimri, the prince of the tribe of Simeon, and a Midianite woman, Cosbi, in the front of the Ohel Moed, the tent of meetings. Once Hashem saw this, his anger was averted. He made a pact of peace with the children of Israel, made Pinchas part of the priesthood, and ended the plague. Since Pinchas is the hero and the Parsha is named after him, I wanted to see if I can find any meaning in his name, which will help answer why the physical break is in the Torah. If we take Pinchas' name and we apply the numeric value for each letter in his name, we get the following. Pei is 80, Yud is 10, Nun is 50, Chet is 8, Samech is 60, for a total of 208. The way you write out 208 in Hebrew is Resh and Chet. Now there's no significance to the Hebrew word Rach, just like there's no significance in Pinchas' life prior to his act of zealotry. However, if we look at this sentence in the Torah which describes the action Pinchas took, you see how this meaningless word of Rach in Pinchas' life are no longer meaningless. Pinchas took a spear in his hand, a romach. You add the mem in his name, and now you see the correlation. Not only by adding the mem into Rach do we see how Pinchas has literally fulfilled his destiny in his own hands, but the mem itself has significance. First, the letter mem has a numeric value of 40. This is significant since the children of Israel have been in the desert for 40 years. 40 is also symbolic of the beginning of a new cycle, hence the expression, life begins at 40. Remember I asked in the beginning, why did Hashem have the people counted again? Well, we now have our answer. It's not because he doesn't know how many people were there, because it took 40 years to close the loop from the old generation, which left Egypt, that had failures with morality and idolatry, to the new generation that were able to maintain standards of morality demanded by the Torah and being able now to enter into this new cycle of a nation. Not only do we see the meaning of how the word Ramach has significance to the numeric value of Pinchas' name, but the fact that the Torah chooses this word to describe what Pinchas took in his hand is not random either. The word Ramach has a numeric value by adding each letter in the word. Resh 200, Mem 40, Chet 8 equals 248. The significance of this number is that out of 613 mitzvot, there are 365 negative commandments and 248 positive commandments. According to the Mishnah, 248 represents the number of limbs in a person. The paradox is that it took a spear, romach, a killing instrument, the same numeric value of all the positive mitzvot in the Torah and the limbs of a person, to kill two people, which reverts Hashem's anger, the cessation of the plague from killing more people, and enabled the children of Israel a new beginning. The last thing I want to share is to show that all that happened thousands of years ago to the children of Israel is actually very relevant to us all today. Everything in the Torah is meant to guide us and show us how to live a moral life. And I want to illustrate how the hidden meaning of the plague of Peor is a lesson we're all learning and experiencing firsthand ourselves today. If we take the numeric value of the letters that make up the word Hamagefa Peor, the plague of Peor, you'll get the numeric value of 133 for the word Hamagefa, and the word Peor of 356. Add the two words together of 133 and 356, and you get a total of 489. If we look at the numeric value of the letters that make up the Hebrew word corona, you get a numeric value of 367. And if you add the numeric value of letters that make up the word COVID, you get a numeric value of 122. You add these two words together, and you get a total of 489. The same value of Hamagefa Peor. So now let's go for Sokol and answer the question of why there is a complete break in the middle of a sentence when it states after the plague. You see, that break to me has a couple meanings. It could symbolize the break between the times before the plague and after. Hashem being furious, and he's now making a covenant of peace. It could mean the division between the old generation that left Egypt, that did not have the moral aptitude to go to the land of Israel, to the new generation 40 years later that is committed to a life of morality as per the Torah. It also could mean that Hashem took a pause to end the plague and the suffering of his people, almost a long sigh, and said, okay, enough, time for a new. Or the break is simply an indication that you can fill in the blank. Meaning, remember that number 489, which is the same numeric number for Hamagefa Peor and COVID? Well, like I mentioned numerous times prior in the speech, nothing is random. 49 is not just a random number either. It's also the numeric value of the word tefedah, meaning you shall redeem. If we don't learn from the sins of our forebears by living a life of morality and Torah, then fill in the blank. In our case, possibly COVID, since what happened thousands of years ago can and will happen to future generations if they go down the wrong path. We are now in the same place that the children of Israel have found themselves. We're now in the place after the plague. We, as the children of Israel, have to find a way to redeem ourselves, like Pinchas and the children of Israel did by committing a life of Torah. And what might you ask? What is the meaning of a life of Torah? Well, we have one of the most famous rabbis to guide us, and that is Hillel. And as he said when he challenged to teach a person the entire Torah while being on one foot, he simply said, I quote, "What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. That is the whole Torah," end quote. May we learn from Hillel. May we learn from Pinchas, and may we learn from the children of Israel that we all go into this period after the plague living a life of Torah by being respectful to ourselves, Hashem, and more importantly, to others. Shabbat Shalom.